I know that I said I was done with the digitakt, but I honestly would be remiss if I was to just leave it at that, because there are a few more things that I want to say about the workflow overall. So I'm going to compress it all into my last digitakt video ever, in which I'm going to cover a couple simple topics that I think will come together to show you an overall picture of why this device is so amazing. The first thing I want to cover is what I'm calling infinite sidechained reverb, which is essentially like a little game that I like to play to figure out how to set up the compressor and the reverb for maximum sidechain pumping. Number two is I want to highlight how good the digitakt is for sequencing external instruments like maybe modular or an SP404. Lastly, I want to talk about, okay, we're sequencing the SP4 and the modular. Now let's sample loops from it, sample frames, different parts of the modular patch or the groove that we're working on with the SP404, sample it, and then flip it using slice mode and put that all together into cohesive patterns where you save everything that you're working on, and it's just one beautiful picture that we all love and is amazing. Okay? So, starting with the infinite sidechained reverb. Okay, so the objective of this game is to make it so that a clap or a snare creates an infinite wash of reverb, and the kick cuts through that reverb, which would sound hopefully something like this. If I go to the compressor page, you can see my voice is activating the compressor, so I'm actually going to mute my voice channel while I show you this. So that is our ultimate goal. And if I turn the compressor off, you can hear that the kick is very loud and the snare is going into this infinite reverb, but they're not really affecting each other. Whereas if I turn it back on, that's a classic kind of sidechain pumping effect that we want to go for. So if I was to say, put the reverb back to default, which I would do by function reverb clear page reverb, and then if I go function LFO clear, that clears the compressor page. And already you can see the defaults are much different than what I was doing. And honestly, I feel like the defaults are weird and don't really help you set this up. So what I want to do on the compressor, I kind of want to use it as a limiter, where right now this is set, the threshold is very low. You can see my voice is clipping like the whole thing. What I really want is a high threshold so that it takes a very loud sound to activate the compressor. And when the compressor is activated, I want to attenuate it significantly. So I'm going to turn the ratio up to clamp down on the signal. I'm going to turn the makeup gain down quite a bit, or not quite a bit, but just like maybe 6 to 8 dB. So I'll go with 7. And then the thing that confuses me, I sometimes see online or in videos people saying that the digitakt can't do sidechain or doesn't have sidechain, or here's a sidechain hack. Well, let me tell you, SCS, that stands for sidechain source. SCF stands for sidechain filter. So if the digitakt can't sidechain, why does it have sidechaining? So the way that I think of it is, for the kind of pumping sidechain, that classic, that EDM crap, we want that. Essentially what we want is to use this sidechain filter so that only really the low and low mids are contributing to the compressor. The gist of how I want to set up the compressor is makeup gain relatively high so that signals that aren't compressed get a significant amount of gain applied to them, which is going to make our reverb tail very loud. Attack and release, those are pretty much good the way that they are by default. You can mess with them to taste. The threshold we want to be higher because we want to think of this as a ceiling, a limiter that's going to keep our main output from clipping. It's going to keep our main output from clipping. And then the ratio says when the compressor is activated, we want to have a high ratio, which means we clamp down on the signal when the compressor is active. So this is the first part of it. And you can hear already that kind of raises, it makes my voice louder, but then also it brings up the noise in the background. And I think that's going to be fine for our case. This is the other key. So if I was to just go, let me go to the reverb. If all I did was just turn it on to infinite, still doesn't really solve our problem. Our compressor is just kind of like weird now. What we need to do, this is the most deceiving, and I don't know why it's set post-comp. Maybe it's because it's like cleaner. Basically, this means, are you putting the reverb before or after the compressor? If you put it before the compressor, you can just hear the difference already. This is post-comp, pre-comp. It makes that reverb tail a lot louder. In the same way that it's raising the noise floor, it's making the reverb tail a lot louder. And actually, I like to filter the reverb to be kind of upper mids. And now we should get our effect, and we can kind of measure how well it's working by looking at this and also listening to it. Like if I want it to take a bigger bite out of it, I want to set the threshold lower. And obviously you can go as extreme or not extreme as you want. I guess my voice has a good amount of lows in it because it's activating the compressor, which is honestly, sorry if I was clipping earlier, that, bad practice, my bad. Anyway, that's essentially how I like to set up sidechain reverb, just for a punchy mix. The point being, obviously you don't want to have infinite reverb all the time, but when you set it up like this and then you dial the reverb back to something more reasonable, you get a good result, a good punchy result, where the lows and the mids and you get the pumping, it glues the track together. This turns it into like a glue compressor. You can think of it as a glue compressor, gluing the reverb, all the sounds that are going through the reverb, gluing them to the amplitude of the low end. Anyway, that is about all I have to say about that. Just wanted to just get that off my chest. It's been sitting there for a while. Okay. The next thing is sequencing. So I have a couple things already set up. So off screen, and maybe I should just pan up to it, I have my little modular rig set up. And actually, hold on, this is going to be crazy. Here we go. Loosen that. So I have CV OCD over here, which is translating my MIDI into 4 channels of control voltage and gate, which I am then going up to marbles, plats, and tides up there. And I'm going to keep the camera right here as I do this. So you can see that basically the patch that I have set up, it's controlling 2 voices. Plats, which is kind of just like a normal multi-tool digital oscillator, and then rings, which is a resonator, a physical modeling voice. I want to control both of these voices with one sequence, so I take one track of the digitakt, set it up so it's on the right MIDI channel for CV OCD, which is going to differ by your case, and then I route it to marbles, like I was saying, CV and gate, and then samples that CV and gate and outputs it in multiples to my 2 oscillators. And also I'm using it to trigger this envelope, which is controlling Plat's volume. Let me just show you the controls that Marbles gives me. So I have this really simple like kick clap kind of pattern. And actually, let me just reset all of the stuff that we just did, just because I had it already dialed in before. So let me just play this, and I think the sequence is going to play as well. Oh wait, I want to play the other sequence. So let's go. We're getting a Grammy with this one, baby. Okay, but let me just show you the point. I'll turn the kick and clap back on. This control right here, so if I go all the way to the left on this control on marbles, it's all going to go all to plats. All of the triggers are going to go to plats. It kind of like randomly distributes it. So now it's all plats. You get the idea. Now if I turn it all the way to the right, it's going to go all to rings. And if I put it in the middle, it's going to go 50-50, which on this pattern does not sound that good. Well, let me turn on the reverb. Another sequence. Well, let's run this once more. Okay, that's kind of way too much. And actually, this is, we're going to get into this in the sampling, but I kind of want to sample different bits and pieces of this and get more into the modular control rather than just listen to this directly. It's nice to sequence the synths, but I more want to like capture the individual patterns and do that. So we'll get into that in the sequencing, but essentially this is really good. I can control a modular voice. I can use the other channels to output different, control voltage controlled by a MIDI track on the digitakt that I can sequence with the pattern sequencer, and then control other voltages in here. So like modulation, I have a source of modulation from the digitakt world, which is able to provide structure to a modular patch which wouldn't otherwise exist. For example, I could move through chord progressions. I could make it so, in this pattern, this CV is really low, so this voice isn't even on. And then in the next pattern, that CV is really high, so the voice is on, and maybe some other stuff changes. You can get as creative as you want with it. That's kind of the beauty of the modular, right? Yeah, okay. Here's the next thing, and we're just gonna go for it. Let me just lower this. We're gonna go over to, here we have the SP404. Can I get a shot where they're both in it? Hopefully I don't disconnect the audio. Okay, this is rough, but we're gonna work with it, because you know what? I'm only doing this once. How's that? On this other pattern over here, so I don't really need to mute all these, but I'm just going to. On this pattern, you can see this is lighting up, and if I go to keyboard mode, basically I have selected the MIDI channel, which corresponds to this bank of pads on the SP404, which means that when I go into keyboard fold mode, which is a new feature that I didn't mention before, if you didn't know about it, go function and hold track, and that takes you into the keyboard menu, and then I go keyboard fold on, and that makes it so instead of kind of looking like a piano roll and having empty slots, it just fills up all 16 of them, which is perfect for controlling an external instrument like this, because it has a bank of 16 pads, and we have 16 pads here, so they correspond to one another. That's really nice. And so essentially, all these samples is I took a regular car reviews section, I sampled it because he was like playing around with a Mercedes that had really nice doors and handles and window things, and like all the actuating sounds were really nice. Anyway, I chopped that up into samples over here. And now I can create a sequence of it on the digitakt, which I already have done here. We can do it again. Let me turn the reverb off. So if I clear that, let's do it again. And this, before I continue, this is really amazing because I love the SP404, but I hate its goddamn sequencer. It's honestly, I can't work with it. The normal workflow that I would suggest is like, well, why don't you just use the sequencer of the SP404? It's like, it's garbage. I can't use it. I love the digitakt. Its sequencer is so much better, and now I can control it in this really intuitive way that's essentially just as good as tapping on the pads directly with maybe like a couple milliseconds of non-noticeable delay. So let me just go in here and do that. Shit, I had 2 more bars to record. Oh wait, is it just muted? Oh, I need to record more bars. Well, let's do that. I think I have quantization on this track, because I'm going to be sampling and resampling this, so I don't really want to like mess it up. But anyway, so now I have these 2 patterns. Maybe it's now time to move into sampling. Basically, I want to take these sequences that I've created. I'm using the digitakt to sequence these external instruments. And, this modular patch is not always going to be this modular patch. And the SP404, maybe I open a different project, then it's not there. How do I capture what's going on right now? The answer is that I just sample it and capture those frames. And then I have that, and I can load it in and then slice it and flip it. I can just play it back, I can play it back and layer a track on top of it that's doing slice mode on top. I can just use slice mode. I can get as creative as I want, but I've captured it in a permanent form where every time I open this pattern, it's going to go to that. And that's really nice. I like that. So, shit, actually I should readjust the camera so that it's like right here. Oh God, what have I done? This video is unhinged, but you know what? I'm done with it. I'm done, and this is the last one. Okay. So what was I going to do? I was going to sample my sequence. So let's say I want to capture a couple frames, and so I want to use this thing I was showing before in the other video. Now I can sample to steps. So my sequence is 4 bars or 64 steps. So I want to sample it in 4-bar increments. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go to my sequence. One, it doesn't matter if the reverb is on. It's not going to sample it with the reverb, even though it monitors it with the reverb. And that goes for the delay as well. That's a really amazing feature, so you don't lose what it sounds like when you're monitoring it with this huge wash of reverb, which is nice. Everyone loves that. But you don't sample that in. So kudos to Electron for that one. Anyway, let me sample a bar here. I'm going to mute this. And actually, real quick, I'm going to turn back on these stereo effects like that. And then this, I guess the stereo-ness of it doesn't really matter. I guess my point is that beads and my other effects are going to add some thickness to it that wouldn't otherwise. Oh, shit, I just... Okay, here we go. Wow, an infallible chord progression. There's none better. There's definitely no missed notes in there. So anyway, we don't even need to listen back to this. Let's just say yes, yes, and let's say assign it to track 7. What? Oh, that's because I'm in this mode. So now if I was to simply play it back with the sequence, maybe I'll go into repitch mode. Say it's 4 bars, and this should just play the sample. Let me give it a little drive. It should kind of play back in with the original. Oh, whoops, I didn't add a trigger. I was like, wow, it's so perfect. No, it's because there's no trigger. Let me just give that the length of... Oh yeah, the infinite... There was a bug where infinite didn't really work. I'm pretty sure it's fixed now. Damn, that missed note is really brutal. I can't believe I left that in the sequence, but again, I don't care. But anyway, the point is, yeah, you get it. I'm playing it back. It's maybe a little weird. Doesn't matter. It's sampling it. It's beautiful. Oh, yeah, and the reason that it's a little weird is because I believe the first note, it didn't really come in on the 1. So, like, the first note was not directly on the 1, therefore it started recording slightly after the 1, which is just another reason why I would like an on-the-1 recording, like I mentioned in the previous video. But anyway... Let's sample another frame. So I got one frame of plats, which I didn't want that one. 1 frame of plats. Now I want to get 1 frame of rings. Let me mute myself again. Did you see how it was the same thing there? So let me say yes, yes. I don't even bother naming it at this point. I'm so beyond that. And now if I say copy I don't even need to copy the trigger, but I'm just going to copy and paste. Now we should listen to these two slightly out of sync. But if I just play it with the original beat, let's see how it sounds. Okay, the original sequence is not that great, but there are good moments in there, and yes, they synchronize, they loop, it works. That's really the important thing here. So now say that I wanted to go back to the Platts sequence, and I wanted to change the oscillator that I'm using. And let me just shop around for another oscillator. Oh shit, I need to mute these. Fuck. Oh, I gotta unmute this. I want something a little more low-key, less high-end, even though I can always filter it down on the digitakt. And also, I really should remove that bad note in there, but fuck it, it's too late. Shit, I didn't mean to arm that. Okay, now let's record another copy of it. All right, let's see how many times we can listen to the same chord progression. It's really, really good. And now, okay, say yes, and then I will assign this to say track 6. And now if I just like press these two, it's two different synth voices of the same sequence with obviously all the slight differences and nuances that take place in a modular performance. I'm not really even modulating like crazy at all in this patch. I could be doing way more, and you should, but for these purposes, this is good. Now let me go to get another one of rings, but this time I'm not going to put the bias all the way to the right, so it's just rings. I'm going to mute plats, but I'm going to put the bias a little more towards the middle, so there's less rings, there's less notes than there would be otherwise. Let me just show you. You know what just happened there? God damn it. What just happened there is I didn't heed my own advice. I didn't actually mute plats. So let me mute plats and let's do that again. And now I screwed up again because I accidentally, for some reason, they're in the wrong order on my mixer, and I accidentally muted the wrong one. So let's do that again. So you notice, could you hear how I went in there and was manually tweaking the parameters with my fingers as I was doing it? That's a really fun way to capture this performance because I like doing that in modular, and sometimes it's hard to translate that natural movement with your hands to a modulator, and sometimes you want to just record it in. And with the digitakt, it's really easy to do that. So let's sample, or let's save this loop, and we'll put it on track 5. So now when I hold these two down, it should be, you know, good, I guess. Yeah, so they work together, I guess, as much as they're going to work in this thing. Now let me just abandon the original sequence, go to these tracks, and I think all I've really done on these is just turn up the overdrive, which I'm going to continue to do, because the overdrive drives the compressor, but it gives it this extra volume. Anyway, I already made that point. But let me go here, and what I want to do on these, I want to put these each in slice mode, because slice mode is the best mode, and I'll show you why. So like our original sequence was pretty much on the notes were on, you know, it's a quantized sequence, so the notes were on. And as a result of that, when we go into slice mode, we have these options. So let me just quickly overview the options of slice mode. We have the grid amount, which is the divisions of the whole sample. So, you know, quarter, eighth, 16th, 32nd, you know, this all depends on how many bars your sample is. We get the length. So right now this is set to 1. So if I have this set to 4, it's going to play a quarter note once. But say I have it set to 64ths, it's going to play just a 64th of a slice, which if it's a 4-bar thing would translate to, I think, a 16th note. But if I was to set this to say 4, it's going to play a quarter note. I think that's right. But anyway, the point is this, let me just show you. I'm going to go over this other pattern. Let me just show you the effect of changing these things. And actually, I'm going to demonstrate it with just this like drum break right here. So yeah, let me just show you. So it's like, see how at the length of one, at the different values of grid, at a low grid, it's going to play just like a quarter note or a half or like an eighth note or whatever. But at the high values of grid, it's just going to loop, because I have it in loop mode. It's just going to loop this small segment, which I always wondered how to get this effect. And it always sounds really complicated, but it's actually not that complicated. I think this is how producers have been getting it for a long, long time. And it's just very exciting to have my hands on this very same technology that's so powerful. And this is why I love slice mode. And that maybe wasn't like the craziest demonstration, but either way, it's beside the point. The point is slice mode is amazing. So I'm able to go in, and let's go back to this pattern. And I want to, oh, whoops, that's not that one. It's this one. So let me just take one or two of these and show you how we can like rearrange it and flip it. So if I go into the keyboard mode, you can see how as it starts playing at each of the things, and as I say make this, let's make it 16th just because this is, I got 16. But as I kind of play with my fingers, that sequences, it changes the start point throughout the sample. And this is like how time stretching is working under the hood. And this is why the slice mode is the best mode, and why it's so powerful, and why it accomplishes what I was not able to accomplish ever with LFOs, because it gives you dynamic control with your fingertips of how the playback moves in the sample. Like, how does the sample play back? You can go forwards and backwards. You can start in the middle, go dee 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 dee. It's up to you. You get to tap it out, and that just feels so natural and amazing. And that's why slice mode is so good and creative. And and let me show you an awesome example where I prove exactly that thing to be true, where I'm in track 5, and I'm just going to play back some of these slices right to the beat. So I kind of want the first part of the chord progression, and the first part, and the second part, and the second part, so let me play it like that. Actually, forget what I said. I didn't really do that, but let me just put a bunch of reverb on this. For good measure. Okay, so now we got that going. I'm actually pretty happy with how that turned out, even if I didn't do what I said. Now let me go to track 6, and I have all the same control, but now this is over a different sequence. But I already know that it layers naturally with the original sequence that I was recording, so that's amazing. I think I want to go 30 seconds. I want to turn on loop mode on this one. Okay, let's give this a go. We're on page 1, right? Okay, so this is where you start to get into the mix and how you want it to be arranged. Keeping in mind this is just one pattern, we can then copy and paste this pattern over with the same exact structure and create a new pattern. And let me see if I can make a cacophony of these ridiculous sounds. Or, in fact, let me just show you, now that we have these multiple samples, it's cool that I'm able to say, I wonder how that thing that I just recorded, how would that sound with one of these different samples? And of course, we're able to modulate the sample slot with an LFO. You're able to really do so many things with this. And let me just see, I'll show you how I can make this one glitch out, I guess. And actually, because it's longer, it's a little harder, but like... Okay, the point is, say that you have a sample in 64th mode and a length of 1 so that it loops like a do-do-do-do-do-do, like a really quick loop. The point that I want to make with slice mode is that you don't have to change the grid. All you have to do is change the length, and then it's going to repeat more of it, and it's going to play out more of the sample. And so there's like changing the grid and changing the length are like these two fundamental controllers over how the slices get played back, their division and the relationship, and then you kind of tweak the looping forward and backwards and whatnot, and then you can change through the samples. This is just like an extremely powerful this is an extremely powerful workflow, and honestly, this validates everything about why the digitakt costs what it does in this day and age. Not that it's even that much, but you can also get one used. The point being, this thing, I bought it, I think, used for like maybe $500 some in like 2018. And now it's worth at least that much, if not more. And it's worth every penny. That's my point here. So I think that's about all I'm going to be able to do in this format. And I'm not going to be able to make the craziest song of all time. It's not going to blow your socks off necessarily, but the workflow hopefully has gotten the point across of like, hey, you can sequence external gear. You can sample loops of that external gear extremely easily in increments like 4 bar, 8 bar, whatever. You can sequence and sample, use all the tricks in the book to get these samples with varieties, sample a bunch of frames of that into your project, and then use slice mode to resequence that and capture it in a permanent way that you honestly otherwise never could just in sequencing external stuff, which is like when I see people with a huge wall of modular and it's just kind of doing the same generative loop over and over, it makes me sad because I'm like, get a small, like, look, and this might be ironic, for people who don't know this stuff, but like this is an extremely small setup. I got random sampler, envelope generator / modulator, voice, filter, voice, trim, which, this is a passive trim, doesn't really do anything. Envelopes and LFOs, another voice, but rings can also be used as a processor, mutable instruments, clouds in the monsoon format for effects, more effects, and then this thing that I never actually use, but actually is really useful, envelope generator. But anyway, you see this is not that many modules. Yeah, it's still expensive, but like the point is, in this day and age, combine a very cheap modular with a digitakt and a CV converter, and baby, you got a stew going. You can throw an external sampler on top of that for good measure, buddy. And then, you don't even need the external sampler. Just learn to play an instrument. Don't be like me. Be good at music. Learn chord progressions. You're probably a musician. Just do that. Sample that in. And yeah, you got a fucking stew going. I don't know what to tell you. Besides this, there's no... whatever the limitations of this device were, the only downside you can say is that it's samples in mono. And yeah, it does break my heart when I'm routing this massive effects chain in stereo in, and it gets sampled down to mono. But guess what? You can easily get the stereo back into the mix, and then you can still use it to sequence your stereo stuff on top. So I don't see it. I see that as a limitation that I'm willing to work with, and pretty much as the only limitation at this point. I don't know what else is a limitation besides maybe like live looping, but honestly, this workflow kind of does live looping as well. It kind of is a live looping like powerhouse, because I can be doing like playing this sequence live, sampling new frames, loading them into the tracks that are playing, and slicing live on top of it. So that's live looping. I don't know. You could be playing an instrument on top. Like, again, if maybe they just added those couple minor tweaks of like on the one recording and the ability to test the loop point better, but like outside of those minor gripes, this is the perfect device. So this is kind of why I don't have that much to say about it outside of like, here's how I use it, and this is how this workflow is powerful with the fundamental tools it provides you. But like, there's nothing left to say besides go and make music. I don't need to be a gear reviewer. I don't need to like, ooh, the new thing came in, unboxing. I don't care about any of that. I'm saying I spent years trying to perfect the perfect minimal studio, and now I feel like I have it, and I just kind of want to make music. And just mess around on it, and that's just kind of for my own sake. That's not to flex on everyone and say, oh, look how good of a musician I am, because guess what, I do tutorials and stuff, maybe I've had some good beats out there. And actually, you know what, let me show you this beat that I was working on. Pause. This next transition is going to be fucked up because I made the pattern all messed up for the tutorial. So, so anyway, that was like pretty insane and unhinged, but like that's the type of stuff that I end up making, and like I spend hours sitting there trying to get it more perfected than that. But at the end of the day, it always comes out like that. So if you like it, that's cool. Maybe I'll post music again. Let me know if you like it. But it's not the craziest. It's something. Of all the music out there, that is one of them. Anyway. I love you guys, and I'm glad to have gotten a lot of this stuff off my chest. And like I said, I don't have a whole lot more to say after this, so I hope you enjoyed it. That's the last you're going to get.